African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with, and I think a lot of these people that you see on television, they're including the people in this audience. They'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged. To do with.
So your initial thoughts about what Donald Trump has stated in regards to sending the National Guard to Chicago?
What I would do is I would tell people to examine the types of cities or the types of spaces in which he's sending the National Guard or deploying the National Guard, even in D.C. You know, when you grow up and you look at D.C., it's like, damn, the White House is right there. It shows it with prestige, but people don't look behind the curtain. People don't look behind the White House and see that, D.C. is deeply impoverished. When you got like 14%, I think it's 14% for D.C., 17% for Chicago, just to go back to Chicago, which both are above the national average. And DC and Chicago, I would warn, are the litmus tests. DC and Chicago are experimental to see how far he can take these things.
Welcome to the channel.
It's definitely in the pot. I wouldn't say it's fully cooked in the moment, at the moment. Before we go any further, peace and love to comrades near and far. Appreciate y'all tuning in just to hear this conversation between me and JB. More importantly, appreciation to JB for having me. Once again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, it is a crap storm, to say the least, in the moment, at the moment. And I think that whoever is in his cabinet was able to talk him down from whatever he was about to go in. He, meaning Donald Trump. I hate even uttering the name Trump because he's such a piece of garbage. But yeah, whoever is in his cabinet was like, oh, you can't do this because this is the ramifications of you having done so, and showed him actual data and showed him what the consequences of his dealings are, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the consequences of his dealings are really just blowing back on all of us. And a lot of people are also saying how they're really seeing how similar to Biden Donald Trump really is. And this really proves the point to, that a lot of us have been making, that really it's not two separate parties. It's really one uniparty. Would you like to expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, they're definitely unified in their approach to just how they would handle foreign affairs. Nothing gets passed through without consent from both parties involved. The problem with neoliberalism or neoliberals in general is that they know what's up, but because they got their piece, because they're secure in housing and just their basic necessities, they'll come back and tell everyday working class people, hey, we know it's messed up. We're attempting to do this versus that. No, they're not, because they also had high military budgets which took away from public funding. They also had ill dealings with China and amongst other countries. The Biden administration, even though going back to the Obama administration, which I constantly bring up just because so many of our people romanticize Obama, without knowing, all money ain't good money, just like all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Everybody don't have your best interests at heart. And, just because somebody speaks the language, just because somebody can understand the language that you're speaking to them, doesn't mean that they're not backdooring you, doesn't mean that they're not cutting deals that operate totally against you. And this is, by far and large, what every single last U.S. president has done. Their attachment is to moneyed interest. Their attachment is to capitalism. How the system came about is how it is maintained, and is how it will continue on, as far as that particular aspect of it is concerned.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is one of the things that has sparked my interest in in having you on is you have a great analysis of the Imperial Core from a more people-centered, human-centered perspective instead of a capital-centered perspective, which I appreciate. there's some people who are in the MAGA sphere that are getting upset with Trump. So, of course, one of the first things that upset them was the fact that Donald Trump decided that he was going to escalate militarily with Iran. That was one big thing. A lot of people in MAGA said we do not want any more foreign wars, and yet this is what's happening. Then the next big thing that happened was really the Epstein files. And if I miss anything, please feel free to fill in. But the Epstein files now, how they basically did this hoopla about how they were going to go after the Epstein files and reveal everything they can in the Epstein files. But then once they looked at the Epstein files, then they kind of reneged on it. And they were like, there's really nothing there. When in reality, they were saying there was a there, which many of us, including myself, believe there actually is a there. But the there that's there shows that is their guy in there. It's a say it in a colloquial way. But also now we have this story that really is getting some people in MAGA world up in arms now, and it involves China. So let's take a look at what Donald Trump says here, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
President Xi would like me to come to China. It's a very important relationship. As you know, we're taking a lot of money in from China because of the tariffs and different things. And it's a very important relationship. We're going to get along good with China. I hear so many stories about we're not going to allow their students. We're going to allow their students to come in. We're going to allow, it's very important, 600,000 students. It's very important. But we're going to get along with China. But it's a different relationship that we have now with China. It's a much better relationship economically than it was before. With Biden, boy, what he allowed they just took him to the cleaners. President.
Your initial thoughts about what was just said by President Trump?
I went back for context, as difficult as it was to listen to this fool. I went back for context and, just listened to the whole thing, which was I think a 4 or 5 minute clip that I had watched. And my thought process is he's posturing. He's not in a position of power the way that he presents himself to be. The U.S. is beholden to China. The U.S. imports more from China than it exports to China. This is just a matter of actual fact. When we look around at just our everyday items, we could look from pharmaceutical goods such as ibuprofen. We could look at electronics. We can look at, there's a wide array of things, including, and because this is something that gets brought up, just because the U.S. itself cannot exist without constant war. I've been around for almost 4 decades, and the U.S. has been in a war in every single last one of them. And here's the reality of it. One of the key elements that goes into weapons, that goes into the ammo, like in guns and stuff like that, is produced by China. So if they cut off supplies, there are so many economic and just political consequences, which is why he's now kind of just watering down the stance that he had originally. You can go back to 2015 and see some of the things that he stated about China's relationship to the United States before his first term, before that first mistake was made. And now we're here, and it's like, yo, you can't do this because here's what this is going to do to the economy. Let me just put it in layman terms. It's going to crash the economy for sure. Economists were already talking about how there's a possible recession. If Trump don't get out this hot water that he's in with China, if he don't walk it back, we're all going to be in some deep shit, Black people in particular, and kind of just analyzing that situation momentarily. But the things that he's talking about as far as these tariffs are concerned would do more to harm the U.S., would do more to harm the citizens of the U.S., would do more to harm working class people than it would do to China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I learned, my comrade Sabi Sab, she actually used to be an academic advisor. One of the things that she taught us was that a lot of these foreign students, one of the things that they are able to do is basically pay tuition in full when they come here. So that means that there are millions upon really billions of dollars in endowments that are in these institutions, especially a lot of the private universities, especially like the Ivy Leagues. And so that, in turn means that college is really just a business. And so therefore, Donald Trump is one of those people who looks out for business interests. This also includes colleges too. He may bluster a lot about what some of these Ivy Leagues are doing. But you also got to remember, Donald Trump is an Ivy League alum as well. And so when it comes to a lot of these foreign students, it's not only that they can pay their tuition in full, but also another thing that is pressing that a lot of people don't think about is these students that come here. And I'm not just talking about China, I'm talking about all over the United States. They will come, they will learn, and then a lot of them, especially from China, go back home. They don't stay because they see economically that the United States is going down. Because the United States is going down and China's coming up, guess where they're going to go? They're going to go where it's going up. So they're going to go back home. So they're going to learn what they can learn here and then go home. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, that is an absolute fact. And like you stated, college is really just a business, or it runs itself like a business, especially when you look and see how many people are in student loan debt. But the messed up part is that you're conditioned from young to learn, hey, you go to school, you get a good job. What happens when you go to school? Do everything that that you programmed to do, essentially. And then you get out and there is no job, or you get out and you're underemployed, which you don't have enough money to pay back those student loans. As far as that aspect of it is concerned, like you said, people come from other countries, pay for their education in full. And part of the issue is nobody ever questions, well, how come they can do this and we can't do this here? And we're the ones that are being fed the propaganda from, the time you can understand what you're saying on the TV screen on throughout the course of your life. The propaganda is pro-US, but the US is not pro-people. The U.S. is not pro its citizenry because of, and you can look at the White House government website. You have to believe what it is that I'm saying and just see all of what the U.S. has actually cut that would make it to where people can maintain just the basic necessities. The U.S. has this history of putting its citizens in peril.
Absolutely. One of the things that I also wanted to shift gears a little bit too, because one of the things that Donald Trump is doing is, and it feels very performative. It feels performative, but at the same time, it feels tangible, but for the parasite class. And I want to share this as well. This recently happened late last week, so I want to get into this. And I actually went on Kit Cabello's show, Heartlands Media, to discuss this particular subject too. Donald Trump speaking about Chicago and what he would like to do. Let's get into this as well.
We have to. And after we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe also. We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. But they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with, and I think a lot of these people that you see on television, they're including the people in this audience. They'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged. To deal with.
So your initial thoughts about what Donald Trump has stated in regards to sending the National Guard to Chicago?
What I would do is I would tell people to examine the types of cities or the types of spaces in which he's sending the National Guard or deploying the National Guard, even in DC. You know, when you grow up and you look at DC, it's like, damn, the White House is right there. It shows it with prestige, but people don't look behind the curtain. People don't look behind the White House and see that, DC is deeply impoverished. When you got like 14%, I think it's 14% for DC, 17% for Chicago, just to go back to Chicago, which both are above the national average. And DC and Chicago, I would warn, are the litmus test. DC and Chicago are experimental to see how far he can take these things. I won't be surprised once it hits my home city of New York. I won't be surprised once it hits LA, which is in close proximity to where I'm at now. My thoughts in regard to what he's saying is he's saying a bunch of nothing. Anybody that's sitting up there and is just, very this, very that, without explaining what the hell it is that they're talking about, anybody else that wasn't sitting in his position, most people would just be like, okay, we're not having this conversation because you're not saying anything. You're not elaborating on, how dangerous the situation is, which is all bullshit. Because if you look at the actual numbers, Chicago is down historically almost across the board as far as crime is concerned. But when you look at the White House website, what they would tell you is the reason why they would be deploying the National Guard to Chicago is because of all of the criminal statistics that are down. Example, homicides are down 33%, anywhere between 33 and 35%, I believe. And then it is shootings are down 38%. Overall violent crime in Chicago is down about 21 to 22%. So when the government is telling you we're deploying the National Guard or we're deploying any type of military in order to be able to handle a situation that doesn't exist, we need to collectively do better about examining what it is they're saying they're going to do, because all of that money that's being poured into militarizing Chicago, into DC, so much could be going into public funding. So that way people do have what it is that they need. So that way people aren't having insecurity about whether or not they could afford groceries or whether or not their kid is going to go to an educational system that is going to be fit for them to actually learn.
Let me ask you this. Could this also be, and maybe I'm wearing my tinfoil hat here, but could this be a ploy to get people up in arms so that it gives the police and National Guard a means to arrest more people, just so that they can have more of an excuse not only to increase police budgets, but also to incarcerate more people, because we know that the goal is to either keep people under wage slavery or put them back within chattel slavery, because we know the 13th Amendment still allows for chattel slavery if you're duly convicted. So is this more of a ploy to get more people either to be, if they can't be wage slaves, then we can get them back to being chattel?
Oh, absolutely. This is full scale kind of like entrapment as far as that aspect of it is concerned. With them putting the police presence in there, with them, it kind of creates this element of fear mongering. It's multifaceted in terms of why they would be doing something like this, like going from police state to military state, which is just elevated at that point. Mm-hmm. For all the reasons that you mentioned. And then you said something earlier that's kind of sticks throughout the entirety of this conversation, which is that colleges are a business. So I look at it like this: the U.S. itself is a business being run by a failed business mogul, and everything under the guise of the U.S. is a subsidiary of it. So your prison system, your school system, public housing, all of these things are contrived by the federal government and carried out by those that are heads of these individualized states. And looking at it that way, I think people have a better understanding of kind of what's going on here.
Understood. Now, the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, has actually responded to what Donald Trump has stated. And let's take a look into what he has said, because he says some things that are correct, but at the same time, I want to point to something that is missed upon him. So let's get into this.
We cannot incarcerate our way out of violence. We've already tried that, and we've ended up with the largest prison population in the world without solving the problems of crime and violence. The addiction on jails and incarceration in this country, we have moved past that. It is racist, it is immoral, it is unholy, and it is not the way to drive violence down. We cannot return to the same failed strategies that got us here in the first place. Under the previous presidential administration, we requested more federal resources to address gun violence in our city. We continue to make that same call. We have made significant progress on our own, but there is so much more that we can do if we had real support from the federal government. We cannot.
So I feel like he's missing something. Can you expound on what you think he missed in that? If you thought he missed anything at all.
I mean, just on a fundamental level, appealing to the same system that's oppressing you. You can't appeal to the federal government. There is no working from within inside the government. You know, we've had since the 60s and 70s, we've had Black politicians, and it's only going to go so far. Black visibility is not Black power. And the reason why I bring that up in that stance is because the people that are going to be hit the hardest, and this is historical fact, are the Black people that live in Chicago, are the Black people that live in DC, are the Black people that live in New York, LA, so on and so forth. So it's like it sounds good theoretically, but it's not far enough. We can't lean on the same system that is hell-bent on keeping things as they are so they can keep on as they are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, I want to share this with people so that we know exactly what we're dealing with. This is actually a breakdown in numbers. It says how much does the Chicago Police Department actually spend each year. This came out in January of last year. It says, as part of the total city of Chicago budget adopted for the 2024 fiscal year that began on January 1st, the city council approved nearly $2 billion budget for the Chicago Police Department. Now, this is more approximately 1.99 billion, but of course, you could just basically say $2 billion. It continues, it says the police department budget represents 12% of the city's total $16.6 billion appropriations for fiscal year 2024 across all funds, including grants. Excluding grants, the Chicago Police Department budget makes up approximately 15% of the city's full $12.3 billion spending plan across all local funds. So $2 billion for the Chicago PD. And my question is, could those resources be better utilized in order to not enforce crime, but to prevent crime? Because the thing is, like, police is just, it's in the name, law enforcement. Police aren't crime prevention. They are not that. They're there to enforce the law. They're not there to prevent it. And so, as somebody with my particular ideology, I feel that they're constantly missing the root causes of crime. Now, he says that we can't incarcerate our way out of this. I agree, but put your money where your mouth is, or put the city's money where your mouth is, right? Because it feels like he's saying all this while still going, well, we got to spend $12 billion on Chicago PD. And I'm like, didn't you guys just have a bunch of schools that closed? It doesn't make sense to me. What about, programs to revitalize, city blocks? Like, for instance, the South Side of Chicago, right? Why not revitalize that area? Why not create a grant program, more after school programs? Why not try to make it so that, I have a lot of qualms with Zohran Mamdani because there's some things that are fishy about him, But one of the things that I actually think is actually a good idea, why not have city-owned grocery stores so that people can be able to afford more, so that they don't have to scrounge for pennies just to be able to buy food, and put them in areas where there are actual food deserts. Like, these are just a few ideas just right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely spot on as far as that aspect of it is concerned. That's why I said that what he was stating is correct for the most part, but it's not going far enough, because in the same token, and this is that backdoor mechanism that I was talking about, you telling the people of Chicago, you understand this is messed up, you shouting that you know this is messed up and we can't incarcerate our way out of it. But if you greenlight this budget, that's part of the problem right there, where that money, like you stated a little bit earlier, can be reallocated to public services, because it's an actual fact that crime and poverty go together. Like, they correlate with one another. Where there is high crime, there is oftentimes high poverty. These are things that are confirmable. These are things that we can look at. Now, if I just stated earlier that the national average for poverty is 11%, 11.5%, I believe, and then Chicago is 17.2%. Part of the problem is you need enough social programs in place in order to be able to get people to be more aware of their environment, to be able to educate people through maybe through like literacy programs, through public education. People need healthcare. People need adequate housing. Here's the reality of it. There is a boatload of unhoused people, more than that, in the United States as a whole. And in major cities like Chicago, we see unhoused, we see in LA and New York, so on and so forth. But problem is, there's more than enough resources in order to be able to make sure people have housing, make sure people have food, healthcare, proper education. Not what they call education, because they're indoctrinating people into believing that this situation is normal, that this is what it is. And you cannot continue on like that. Like you stated just a moment ago, there are food deserts. Even in my old neighborhood of Woodside Houses, which is back home in Queens, they're creating a food desert by removing grocery stores or keeping things in there that do not are expired a lot of the time. That compounds the issue of having a food desert. Oftentimes in cities like Chicago, New York, LA, there is an over infestation of like rodents, which is health and safety at that point, or, because they don't do things like basic trash pickup. They believe that the people that are in these conditions or in these situations, be it you be in the projects or you be in prison, deserve to live in squalor because they didn't work hard enough in order to be able to get themselves out of it. Liberals believe that shit too. They just don't say it the way that the conservatives say it. And that's part of the issue right there, is that we as a people have to have a better understanding of what is being said to us. I go back to one of the things that I said in an earlier conversation that we had, which is when I was a kid and I didn't understand something, my mom would just send me to the room and look at the dictionary for this word or that word. We have to get back into understanding that and examining why things are what they are, and point the finger at the correct place, which would be the system that's currently in place. It is literally unlivable for any and everybody outside of that less than maybe 1%. That is the capitalist class that controls all of the resources, all of the funding. John Henry Clark, just kind of riff on him a little bit, once stated that you cannot afford to, or the power structure can't afford to actually teach people that are oppressed, because once you figure this out, once you're educated, once you know enough to get out of your oppression, you know enough to get your people out of the oppression, they know enough to get their people and so on and so forth out of the oppression, which would upend the system. And those that are in power can't have us changing the status quo.
Yeah. I think about, this is one of the reasons why the Black Panther Party was considered so dangerous in Chicago, because of what they were doing. They were actually, because it wasn't just giving food away. It wasn't just giving healthcare away. It wasn't just doing, a free ambulance. It wasn't just, doing free plumbing. It wasn't just doing that stuff. It was the education behind it that made them so dangerous. Because the problem is that If you're just giving stuff away, that's a charity. But if you're giving things away to people while educating them to have to wield their own power, that's mutual aid. And that's what makes the government so scared. And it's not, is it really the government? It's really the corporations, and the government is really the hammer that the corporations use against the people instead for the people, right? And so I'm looking at this possibility, and one of the things that is crazy to think about, if Donald Trump is willing to send the military into Chicago to fight crime, couldn't that money be used, instead of sending military, could it be used as a humanitarian force to help uplift the people instead of incarcerating them? Or use that money to just pour into the neighborhoods to lower the crime? Because as we all know, poverty and crime are linked very closely together. And at a commensurate rate, once you lower the amount of poverty, crime also follows. Because it's not exactly the one-to-one, because even, people who are affluent or wealthy also commit crimes. Hello, we see it every day. But it is to a lesser degree because they don't have to commit crimes of desperation or lack of opportunity. So instead of diverting that money to the National Guard, why not just divert that money to the people who are the most disenfranchised in places like Chicago?
It would dismantle the system if they did it. That's precisely why they won't do it. It'll dismantle the system, and everything that they've been taught they now understand was a lie, as far as that particular aspect of it is concerned, right? Like, instead of the United States as a structure would have to understand what humanity is in order to be able to actually give genuine humanitarian aid to these places. When you look at the United States is the biggest dehumanizer, is the biggest destabilizer, is or wants to be the biggest bully on the block. And it's like, kind of going back to the section we were talking about on China earlier. China is on some, you could throw that punch, but I'm going to knock your ass out. And so, that's the only way you get rid of a bully. Anytime you hear about the United States even going off the Panthers and their impact in Chicago and in LA and in New York and so on and so forth, they attempted to dismantle the Panthers by literally having feds knock on people's doors to tell them that they were poisoning the kids. So when you have a collective such as the Panthers that were about community above all else, that wanted the interest of the people, that were very educated, Dr. Huey P. Newton was extremely educated, extremely intelligent, knew the law better than the ones that were supposed to be enforcing it, because to kind of go back to what you stated earlier, law enforcement, let's call it what it is property protection. And who owns the property? Who owns the means of production, right? Yeah. America itself should be America Inc. It is a business model. Any way you look at it, you literally have politicians now that are trading stock. Are you serious?
Yeah, well said.
So, it's, we have to think beyond just this is what's happening right in front of us. What the United States government has done, in a sense, is kind of create this, their method or their version of Plato's allegory. You can't see shit past the United States. The people in Plato's allegory can't see past the cave. So you don't know what's out there. You don't know what's behind the curtains. And what's even worse is they're dumbing you down so much that you're not even willing to examine. And I'm not calling nobody dumb. I'm just going off of the method that they're using. Yeah. You're not even willing to examine why things are what they are before you get to what things are, where they are, and where it's going. That's true. History is critical. History is important. Trump is an individual, but the system be the system, and it's been that way longer than you and I have been alive, or longer than I'm pretty sure anybody that's tuning in has been alive. Yeah. The U.S. is hell-bent on maintaining this imperialism, which is world rule over world rule, and then you finding people where it's like, yo, nah, this don't work. Yeah. This is cruel. This is inhumane. This is like, you got to be shitting me. But here we are.
One more question in regards to Chicago before we move on to our last piece that I want to cover. What would you say to the people who are saying that we need the National Guard here to fight crime? Particularly, there are some Black folks in Chicago that have been saying that they want President Trump to send, and there are videos that have been put out by Black people in particular that have been saying, yeah, we need, better crime prevention here. And there's been Black people posting videos and saying, I don't have anybody trying to, steal from me now in Chicago. I can walk outside at night safe and sound. What do you say to them who are convinced that what Donald Trump is doing is the right course of action?
I would try to build with them and just say, hey, listen, I understand where their fear is coming in at, but their fear is also contrived in large part by the United States. You got people on these mainstream news outlets. The mainstream news don't give you actual news. Who owns these outlets? Who owns the newspapers? Those who own the media control the narrative is what I would say. So if you saw this bullshit on Fox News or ABC or CNN or any of these other idiotic publications that don't do nothing but, echo the elites, then you're looking at this the wrong way. We have to examine it from what is actually causing people to do harm to somebody else. What is actually causing people to rob somebody? There's people out there with nothing to eat. There's people out there with no way to sleep. They're not robbing you because they want to. They've been devalued, so they themselves devalue everything else around them because the government has done everything it can in order to dehumanize them. Yeah. Be it a fucked up school system, be it, that guidance counselor, which is happening to me too, or, oh, you're not college material, you can't do this, or you can't, because college is the measuring stick for how smart somebody is. But you stated earlier that Trump went to an Ivy League school. We have to connect these things together and be like, a lot of these people that's in college don't be knowing shit. They just indoctrinated and can regurgitate information versus understand it, versus actually understand the material conditions and needs of the people versus, and we have to really just sit down and build and actually take a long, hard look at what the cause of all of this is. There's cause and effect for everything. You didn't just get to the effect out of nowhere.
Yeah, of course. And there is a piece that also in regards to crime that Donald Trump has spoken about. And I really wanted to spend just a really short period of time on this one. But this actually just came out. Oh, that's not what I want to show. This actually just came out. I think it was within 24 hours. Donald Trump said this, and a lot of people have been correcting him. But of course, Donald Trump is going to use this because he's trying to feed his nationalistic base. Let's take a listen to this, and then we'll talk about the other side.
And what the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. No early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way, did they?
Yeah, incite.
Incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record. And you will see flag burning stopping immediately.
So didn't we have a Supreme Court case already about this?
But as far as like flag burning?
Yeah.
I don't remember off top. I'm pretty sure there is, though. I'm going to be all the way honest and say I don't remember off top. I just find this shit funny that one of the biggest criminals is telling somebody else what a crime would be. Like, did you or did you not incite the shit that happened on January 6th? These are words that came out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. How quickly they forget the stupid shit that comes out of their own mouths is contradictory of what it is they say they believe. The United States is the biggest purveyor of crime as far as that aspect of it is concerned. And talking about flag burning, listen, everybody that is near or by a flag should burn that motherfucker. And here's why. The flag, the stars and bars, especially for Black folks in particular, have always represented state-sanctioned violence. How did we get here? We were kidnapped. What happened once we got here? They beat the shit out of us. They did all types of things to us some of the things that I, probably won't mention in the moment at the moment for everybody else's understanding. But in the grand scheme of America, slavery is not that far behind us. Chattel slavery is not that far behind us. And you go from chattel slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration. And when you look at the population that's behind these walls, Black people get incarcerated and do large numbers based off of the shit they think we did. We got evidence of these idiots doing these heinous things, and there's no penalty. Literally no penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I just want to share this because Community Notes actually just shot Trump down. Let's take a look. It says the Supreme Court case Texas v. Johnson establishes that burning the American flag is protected speech under the First Amendment. So a lot of people are basically saying, like, you cannot do an executive order to that violates the First Amendment, and it's anti-free speech, and to be able to do that. However, one of the things that actually happened as of recently was that a gentleman decided to call Donald Trump's bluff. And in calling that said bluff, he got arrested. So I just want to share this because this gentleman now is speaking out and telling people that, and a lot of people are saying, well, the United States is fascist. And the thing is, like, a lot of us are like, no shit, Sherlock. We've been saying that for years. Where have you been? And shout out to Tired Peasant for this one, because she shared this, and I want to share what this gentleman said on the other side, because, well, he's got some points.
Yep, I'm being detained because I expressed my First Amendment right to burn the United States flag in public, not causing harm or causing any danger to any citizens or personnel in the area. Do this for every single one of you American citizens. We burn this flag in protest to that president who feels that it's his right to do whatever he wants, make whatever law he wants, regardless if it's legal or illegal. It is our First Amendment right to burn this flag, regardless of what the president says.
So this just goes to show that, the executive order is, now in effect because he wants to punish anybody that desecrates a flag. But if we're actually going to go by flag code, then everybody desecrates the flag.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's a fact, because it's even put, it's stated that you shouldn't pretty much paint people that paint their nails, people that do all types of shit with the flag are not necessarily using it the correct way, just to put it plain, which they look at as like a desecration of the flag.
Yeah. I mean, people literally have swim trunks and drawers. They wear US flag underwear. That's actually against flag code. That's actually desecrating the flag. And yet we allow companies that sell it, right? Mm-hmm. And how many of those companies have it is made in China? And yet
that's what
allow
it. That's what I'm going to say too.
It's kind of weird, right? It's like you want to go after somebody for lighting a match and putting a flag on fire, which is protected free speech. But at the same time, you're not going to go after the person that's wearing a flag as a bandana.
But this is also why the Constitution is like a flawed document. And I tell people this often, outside of the fact that I didn't remember that particular case law. But if you can, get you a copy or download a PDF version of the Constitution and read over it in your own time. I would ask everybody to do this and see how much bullshit is in there as far as that particular aspect of it is concerned. Because while it's like, all right, cool, you have this freedom of speech in the First Amendment, that's valid. When it diverges away from the program, they do everything and anything to suppress it. Look at what they've done to journalists throughout the course of history. Look at what they've done as far as revocation of passports. We could look at like Du Bois, who had his passport revoked. We could look at like a Paul Robeson, who had his passport revoked. We could look at people that have ended up being political prisoners. Mentioned Mumia earlier. You know, we got Angela Davis at one point was a political prisoner and also lost her spot teaching in California because of her affiliation with communism. There's always like this buzzword that the government uses to make people think that if they can't send you into exile, if they can't put you behind bars, if they can't murder you, these are all the things that they're talking about when they talk about neutralizing a threat. Kind of going back to the Black Panther Party momentarily, J. Edgar Hoover said the biggest threat to national security is the Black Panther Party. Let's look at what the Black Panther Party was doing when you put in health programs, when you put in education programs, when you put in breakfast programs to people that need it. The same way there's this clip of this guy burning a flag and getting arrested for it and talking about how his rights have been trampled on. There was also like a video that I seen the other day where these people were handing out pizzas to unhoused people. Police come out asking about a goddamn permit or places or restaurants that'll fire their employees if they don't throw food out, if they give it away, because it's looked at as stealing instead of, yo, I know I'm going home and I got a warm bed and I know I got something to eat. This other human being don't have nothing, and you're telling me I can't give it to him because I'm subject to ending up in a similar situation or worse. Where's the humanity in that?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But we talking about like flag burning. Motherfuckers wasn't talking about crosses being burned on the lawns of Black folks for however many decades. We brought up Chicago, bringing up the Black Panthers, Chairman Fred. These racists go and shoot up his headstone every chance they get.
They do. Yep.
You know, like it
for him. You know, they don't have any laws saying that you shouldn't desecrate the dead like that.
Even your baby's education, I would say start them at home and let them know what's real. They not too young to learn, because these same folks is out here teaching their kids racism that's the same age as your kids that's too young to learn. Whatever it is you think they too young to learn, you better tell them about real life and what's out there so they prepared for it. Because the way they're doing it now with removing programs that talk about history, particularly Black history, by referring to it as critical race theory, which you don't get until you get to college. Even in college, you have to take a particular discipline to even learn critical race theory. My undergraduate or institutionalized undergraduate situation was in political science. I have a degree in poli-sci because I hated the system so damn much. I'm like, let me find out what these inner workings are. Let me find out what's going on, you know, with this, and then find all of the contradictions within it. We have to be able to approach contradictions head on and meet the truth where it's at. The United States don't give a damn about its citizens and will do any and everything in order for the people that's at where they at to stay where they are.
Yep, absolutely. Now I want to switch gears, but one of the last things I want to talk about is actually employment, especially within the Black community. This has been a story that I covered about a week or so ago, and I just want to get your analysis on this. So this is actually a report about 300,000 Black women have left the workforce. I say fired, or I would say laid off, but let's just watch this. And if you would like for me to pause, so if you're going to make a point, please feel free.
To the economy now, where staggering numbers have been released surrounding Black women in the labor force. A new report shows more than 300,000 Black women have left the workforce in just the last several months. That's according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Joining me now is gender economist Katika Roy to break this all down and why they're leaving. Katika, thank you so much for being with us. You recently wrote an article where you say that this isn't happening by accident. Why do you think it is happening?
This is happening because of cuts to public sector positions. So if you look at the federal labor force, Black women make up just over 12% of the federal labor force. It's about double their representation in the labor force overall. And when you have targeted cuts up to 50% in organizations such as the Department of Education and HHS, you're not just trimming the fat, you're actually cutting the economic backbone for Black women.
Wow. And so what are some of the spillover effects from all of this?
Well, one of the things that we know is that there is a connection between women's labor force participation and GDP. So just Black women's labor force participation has dropped by just over 2% in the last 3 months. And that has sucked over $37 billion out of US GDP. So this is the economic cost of gender policy ignorance.
So let me get your thoughts on this, because a lot of people are saying that, well, if they get fired out of the public sector, they can just go into the private sector. What's the big deal?
Private sector is exponentially harder because they're not beholden to the same restrictions the public sector would be. That's for starters, as far as like hiring practices and shit like that. And then the other part of it too is I kind of want to just preface everything I'm about to say. I understand the topic, but I'm not a fan of just highlighting just this particular group or that one. Like I would feel the same way if it was just, oh, Black men have this many people unemployed. The problem with that is, especially, outside of just the liberal take that this woman had on it, was it's a divide and conquer tactic utilized by the system. So if we highlight these women, what about the Black men that are without jobs and the statistics in order to be able to prove that, right? And then we're talking about Black unemployment without even attaching the other part of it, which is Black underemployment, which would be, yeah, you working, but you don't have enough to get the basic necessities that you need. I grew up around people that worked and was on welfare and had to do different things in order to make ends meet so they could feed their families. And again, I grew up in a housing project. Like I said, above all else, it's peace and love to my brothers and sisters. But like, we have to also, as a collective, come together and be like, all right, well, this is what this public mainstream news outlet is saying. This is what the reality of these DEIs, which was, used to be known as, I don't know if people still use the term, but affirmative action, is everybody, Black women and Black men in particular, are subject to this. The Black unemployment rate is double that for your white counterparts, and to have a white woman getting up there talking about what she thinks the problem is, that's problem number one right there. How the hell are you going to understand something you never experienced? You will never experience what these Black women got to go through. White men have never experienced what Black men got to go through. And the bullshit they tell you is, oh, well, I'm not like that. You part of the problem because you're not telling the people that are like that how messed up it is, because you don't want to lose whatever station in life you got.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if we're looking at this right, since the beginning of the year, 300,000 Black women have exited the workforce, is the way that they would phrase it, or have left the workforce because of the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in talking about taking the backbone away from them economically, why is all of the economic responsibility on Black women to begin with? And then it's that if we examine that, we have to go back to who are they, who is incarcerated en masse? Is it not Black men? Is it not their partner, their brother, their son, so on and so forth? I get asked this question a lot because I'm from the projects, and a lot of the homies got like cases or ended up in tough situations. What separated me from that? How did I end up not like that? And it's literally a matter of choice and chance. Mom's laid everything out for me from the beginning in order for me to be able to make my own thoughtful decisions. It's literally situations where I left friends 30 seconds ago, and 30 seconds later, police got them. And then they go in and they doing bids. And even if you do a bid as a teenager, as a Black man in America, that should stay on your record.
Yeah.
And even if you got an education, even if you got an institutionalized education, such as myself, look at your employment rate. Look at the employment rate for your white counterparts. These racial disparities are also something that's contrived by the same goddamn system. So we keep getting up here, and these people that's on these mainstream media outlets are saying what Mumia Abu Jamal refers to as allowable language. They saying what they allowed to say, because the moment they take that shit too far, they up out of there. They losing their job, and they ain't gonna go that far.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the crazy part is, the same, like, for instance, I have to admit, confession time. I did watch that Jubilee episode with Amanda Seales, where she was versus 20 Black conservatives. And the crazy part is, a lot of people a lot of them were saying, well, there's not enough black men in the household, and they're not raising their kids. And number one, statistically, actually, black men are actually more present in their children's lives than any other race that's actually been done. So therefore, we are actually more present in kids' lives. That's one thing. But the second thing is, once you go into the why as to why there weren't that many black men raising their kids, was because a lot of them were incarcerated. Well, why were they incarcerated? Well, you got to look at two things. Look what the CIA did as far as drugs. And number two, you also got to look at things like the 94 crime bill, and as well as how poverty contributes to crime. And so once you do that, then guess what? There are men going out to work, but some of these jobs that these men are doing aren't very legal. So guess what? They get caught up and then they get into the system, even though they were still trying to raise their kids and take care of their families.
Yeah, because nobody is trying to see their babies go hungry. Nobody is trying to see somebody that's dependent on them not have. That is psychologically damning. You know what I'm saying? Like, as outside of just the providing, outside of being a great partner, it's like, yo, like, how do you look at your babies and tell them, yo, we ain't got enough to eat because this job that I'm working ain't paying me enough for us to be able to eat. And ain't paying me enough for us to be able to put clothes on all y'all backs. And that is life for the lot of us. You know what I'm saying? Like, people live in check to check. People that, there was a point in time in which, even working 2-3 jobs, living in New York, I'm like going to the grocery store with my wife, fiance, then it's like, yo, we kind of got to put some of this back because we don't have enough money to pay for all of this and pay rent at the same time.
Yep, you got to choose.
And people that's looking at that is like, yo, I don't want to have to choose between my basic life necessities. So here's what we're doing. You have to go outside of the system because the system itself is hell bent on keeping you in the situation that you are. Yep. Black folks get fired faster. Black folks, even from school age, get suspended at a higher rate. They're faced with expulsion. Anything you can think of as far as obstacles, the system will throw it in front of them. Yep. I remember being my first interaction with police, I was 9 or 10 years old. I was in the 5th grade. I forged my mom's name on a letter. I was, of course, disciplined for it, but it was a small note. And there's 3 officers standing in front of me in the office, in the principal's office of the school. Over a forged note. You see what I'm saying? So, and it's like that in New York, or, having my first little summer job or whatever, and I'm walking home and I got the lieutenant stopping me, talking about I look suspicious. Or the cops is at the crib because they looking for one of the homies, not even looking for me, trying to get information. I'm like, nope, I ain't seen them. So the state does these things. You are, whether people want it, you closer to prison than you are to being free in this country that people think they are, which is why books like I want to say Arasami Burton's Tip of the Spear is important, because he draws that parallel within it. And it's important to understand that you're not as free as you think you are. Right. As evidenced by that video you just showed, you don't have freedom of speech if it runs counter to the program. Yeah. You don't have freedom of press if it runs counter to the program. Let's look, because you got the kefir behind you. I got to touch on it. Let's look at the situation in Israel. Look at how many journalists have been murdered from telling the goddamn truth.
I think it was over 300.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And or look at what they've taken out. They've taken out journalists. They've taken out schools. They've taken out hospitals. Yeah. Look at the ghetto in America. Your hospital is crap. You under heavy police occupation. Yeah. Militarized police occupation.
Absolutely.
So people have to examine these things a little bit further, examine the nuance that's in it. Yeah, somebody could be saying something and it sounds eloquent and it sounds articulate, but when you look deeper, it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I had more questions, but you have been more than generous with your time. I promised you 45 to 55 minutes, and we are over that. But man, I'm glad I had you on, because this was a very well stated deep analysis that you have took. You not only took us 50,000 feet, but you also brought us back down to ground. You landed the plane smooth, like one of them superstar pilots that get on the intercom. Is like, so we'll be flying at 50,000 feet. I hope you guys are ready to go. I hope you guys got yourself your peanuts and maybe a little Long Island iced tea. We're gonna be enjoying this. We're gonna be flying for about 2 hours from Philadelphia to Florida, and I hope you guys enjoy your vacation.
I appreciate it, man. Once again, I appreciate you having me on and allowing me to come speak on your platform. So thank you for it.
Yeah, thank you so very much. Also, just to let everybody know, your group, All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is the website. Also put in the website in the description so you guys can take a look at it. So this is the organization that you're with as well. So if you guys would like to give them a look, I highly recommend it. Just like what Kwame Ture said, every revolutionary has to belong to an organization in order to be able to make real change. So I just want to thank you for coming on and having this wonderful, worthwhile conversation with me. And thank you for elevating the conversation even more than even I anticipated. And I anticipated a lot. So thank you so very much.
Peace. Y'all have a good one. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day and be safe, but stay dangerous. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.